Right, hello. So for this week's demo lab, you have the assignment document here and then your syntax document here. So here's my assignment. Okay, so this first one we're not using SPSS for. It says to find the results of a scientific poll online. So you don't want just like one that was done on social media or something else. You want one that used probability sampling, right? That's meant to be representative of a target population. And that's also going to give us a margin of error, which is what we need to calculate a confidence interval. So on here, I've posted some links to some different websites. You can find your own if you want, but you can use any of these. So I'm going to use Pew, and I'm just going to use this first one. Latinx awareness has doubled among U.S. Hispanics since 2019, but only 4% use it. So I need to find, so I'm going to share the URL here. It says, share a screenshot of poll results for a question and of the margin of error for the group asked about that poll question. If you choose a question asked of a subgroup and the margin of error is not provided for that subgroup, choose a different question. So like if I want to see a certain age demographic or a certain political party or whatever else, but the article doesn't give me the margin of error for that, I'm not going to use that because I don't want to do those calculations. I'm using one that already gives me the margin of error. Okay, so I need to find a result. So how about I just do this one? Nearly half say they have heard of Latinx. So this is among U.S. Hispanic folks. So we can see that 47% here in 2023 is the percent of Hispanic adults who say they have heard of the term Latinx. So let me just take a screenshot of that. And now I need to find the margin of error for that. Again, I could choose a different question if I wanted. I just chose that one. So these Pew studies can be long. I can search. You can see margin of error is not on this page. I'm going to keep going. So it has more information. This is what I was talking about in terms of by age. So like if I wanted to just know, let's say for this question, like if I wanted to just know about women or younger folks, right, that would be a subgroup. Here's some acknowledgement stuff, pre-related reports, supplemental table. Okay, so here is where it's telling me about how they calculate it in different other statistics. And so you can see here that it has the margin of error, the margin of sampling error for the full sample of the 5,078 respondents, which in this case is the Hispanic adults, is plus or minus 2.0 percentage points. So for this one, you can see that here are subgroups for just like based on gender. There are margins of error, but it says sampling sizes and sampling errors for other subgroups are available upon request. So we don't have margin of error. Like if you want to do the younger adult demographic or other ones, we don't have that available. So you want to do one again that you have data for. Okay, so construct a confidence interval for the poll results. So again, it was 47%, and my margin of error was 2%. So for my lower bound, I just do 47% minus 2%. And for my upper bound, I just do 47% plus 2%. And that's going to give me my upper and lower bounds for my confidence interval, right? I'm taking the sample proportion and adding and subtracting that margin of error. Okay. Next, it says explain what your confidence interval means in real life context. So again, unless it's saying anything different, right? We're doing 95% confidence intervals. That's generally the default, right? The US Census, when they have their different surveys they do that are of samples uses 90% in the margins they give you, but if it doesn't say anything, you can assume it's 95%. So I am 95% confident that somewhere between 45% and 49% of US Hispanic adults, right? So this is always the same here. I'm 90% confident that. And then this one is a proportion one. So we're talking about the proportion that said they have heard of the term Latinx. And then this is our target population. And again, it was have heard of Latinx. This would be as of November 2023. That's when the poll was. Okay, so I'm just using my template here. So this is in chapter 5. This is a proportion one. And so here's my template, right? So we're 95% confident that, right, as of November 2023, somewhere between those 2% of US Hispanic adults had heard of Latinx. Okay, so that's all you have to do for that. I'll show you just with one more. So if I go to Monmouth University, polling, the Polling Institute. So I can look at these. I'm gonna choose this one. And again, there's lots of things I can do. I can look at the percent of, so this is a survey of Americans, I'm guessing US adults or US adult voters, we could look and see, but I could do, what percent think it's a major problem, the unwillingness to accept election outcomes. I could do that among Republicans or independents or Democrats. I could choose, any of these. I think the one in here that is interesting is this authoritarian belief scale. So where are people on this authoritarian belief scale? And it says in here that the authoritarian tendencies is adapted from the right-wing authoritarian scale, and theirs is based on responses to 6 items in the poll. They're combined into these 4 categories for high, above average, moderate, and low authoritarian inclination. So just so you have an idea of what those are, let's look and see what. So people were asked about their extent of agreement with these. Our country will be great if we honor the ways of our forefathers and get rid of the rotten apples who are ruining everything. The old-fashioned ways and values still show the best way to live. What our country really needs is a strong, determined leader who will crush evil and take us back to our true path. The country would work a lot better if certain groups of troublemakers would just shut up and accept their traditional place in society. There is no one right way to live life. Everybody has to create their own way, and it is the duty of every patriotic citizen to help stomp out the rot that is poisoning the country from within. So again, if you were just choosing a question, you could choose just one of these, but they made an index, right, where they combined people's answers to all of these together to put them on a scale around authoritarianism. And so what we ended up with is here. And so it says, let's just take this one again. You could do confidence intervals for each, but let's just take the All Americans high. And again, we could do a subgroup if we wanted instead. So for All Americans high, it was 18% who were high on the authoritarian belief scale. So I could, again, take a screenshot of this, or I could take a screenshot of this, or both. And then I need a margin of error. So if I search, you see that, again, these are often not upfront. So they just say here, oh, it's 48%. I mean, it's 18%, right? And if we read the results here, let me go back up to, where was that? High, so they say 18% of the adult population is high, but it's actually 18% of the surveyed people, right? And so we don't know we don't know about all of the folks surveyed until we look down and look here. So here is the margin of error, and it's plus or minus 3.8%. Let's see. And then it says sampling error can be larger for subgroups, right? Because they have smaller sample sizes and there might be more variation. And so here they're giving us demographic percentages, but we'd have to still calculate our own margins of error. But if I open up this, let's see if they have anything more here, right? I could also then copy survey results from this, but let me see if they give us, yep. So here you can see they have margins of error for different groups. So like if I wanted to look at just Republicans or just white non-Hispanics or just people that are lower income or just people who are liberal, right? I could, and I had the survey results for that, I would use these margins of error instead. So I would find the margin of error for that specific subgroup. But what I was doing, right, was the total. And so that was it 3.8%? And I was looking at no, we're going to do this on the index. I guess that each of the questions would have a margin of error. We're not going to worry about kind of calculating it out and figuring out. We're just going to treat this normally. And so it was 18%. And again, the margin of error was 3.8%. So again, if I was doing that one, I would do, right, 18% plus or minus 3.8%. And so I'd end up with 14.2% to 21.8%. And so I'd say that I'm 95% confident that somewhere between 14.2% and 21.8% of this was adults in the US. So US adults have high inclinations towards authoritarianism. So that's right, about 1/5 or a bit under. Again, you want to make sure that you see what that target population is. So for example, this one is New Jersey. That one doesn't have poll results actually. All poll reports. So these say national, but for example, this one's just New Jersey. So if I was looking at World Cup support, then again, this is New Jersey adults. So my target population is not all US adults, it's just New Jersey adults. So you want to make sure that you're specifying that when you're interpreting in context. Okay, let's go to number 2. So now I'm going to open up that same data set and codebook that we used for the demo lab last week from the General Social Survey, which is a representative sample of US adults, this one from 2022, and open up my new syntax file. I already opened those. If you need to pause, go ahead. And it says that I'm going to generate a 95% confidence interval for the mean of theism. Okay, so I'm going to make sure my syntax commands are going to show up. I'm going to weight. Again, the weight variable that I use for GSS, I named it weight variable. And then I'm going to use examine here. And you can see we're doing a 95% confidence interval. If you were to generate something like a 90% confidence interval or 99, you would just change that percentage right here. This is telling it to do a 95% confidence interval. And I'll click play. If I wanted to do this with dropdowns, again, I could go edit, options, viewer, make sure that this is checked and click OK. Data, weight cases, find my weight variable, put it in here and click OK. And then in the syntax, this is called examine. In the dropdown, it's going to be explore. So I go analyze, descriptive statistics, explore. I would put theism into there. And I can just click OK. If I want to turn off plots or whatever else, I can decide to do different things. But the default here will give me confidence interval. Okay, so here's what I get. And so there's a lot of info here. You can just copy and screenshot this, but we're focused on this. I'm just going to get rid of this so we can focus on the rest of it. You don't have to do that, but I'm just highlighting and right-clicking, clicking delete. Okay, so right? I need to copy my syntax over the demo lab. And then I need my output, which is right here. Oop. Okay, what are the lower and upper bounds? So here's the mean, right? The sample mean. Here's my lower bound, and here's my upper bound. So the lower bound is 4.61, and the upper bound is 4.74. Explain what this means in context. So this one is a mean, right? It is not a proportion. And so if I go to my template for that, you'll see it's right here. Sometimes it flows better, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we are 95% confident that as of 2022, the mean, so now I need to know what this actually is. I'm going to go to my code book and look at theism. Level of belief in God for US adults, right? That's the target population for GSS, was somewhere between 4.6 and 4.7, meaning on average they were, and if this was kind of wider, let's say you were doing a feeling sonometer, it was like 40 and 60, I would name what those are, but these are both, I mean, this is narrow and it's both right here. And so that would be between finding yourself sometimes believing in God and having doubts but believing. And it's, so they were, let's say often believing in God with doubts. That's how I'm going to kind of describe that 4.6 of where that would be. Okay, let's try just one more here. I mean, let's look at the hours worked last week. So that's going to be hours last week. So how many hours did you work last week? And again, I can do either way. And so you see here that we have our 39.91 and 41.14. So what this means is, right, that I'm 95% confident that as of 2022, among working US adults, the average number of hours they worked was somewhere between like 39.9 hours and 41.1 hours. Okay, so we don't know if the actual average was 39.9, 40.2, 41.1, but we're 95% confident it's somewhere in that range. That's what the mean or average is for that target population, right? So this is for the sample, it was 40.5, but due to sampling error, right, it could be anywhere from here to here. We're not sure. For that one, again, because it's the number of hours, there's not a lot of interpretation, right? I just say the number of hours and that's what it is. If you were to say the degrees, like for a feeling thermometer, again, you'd want to go and look at that thermometer and say what those actually mean. Okay. Next, it says, is your confidence interval a sample or inferential statistics? How do you know? So confidence intervals are inferential statistics, right? When we're looking here, this is the sample statistic. This is of the 2,300 folks, or I mean, weighting's on. I'd have to turn it off to see the exact number of folks, but of the respondents who answered, this is the mean. Similarly, for this one, of the like 2,000 or so respondents, this is the mean. That's the sample. And then this is the inferential one. The confidence interval is always inferential because we're trying to make a claim about the population. So we're taking our sample data and we're inferring information about the whole target population. What is the point of generating and sharing confidence intervals? So again, the point here is that nobody cares about these 2,300 adults, right? Like they were just randomly selected from all US adults. We don't want to know what their beliefs in God are. We don't want to know how many hours they worked last week, right? The reason that we surveyed them is to know about our target population. So when you're sampling, it's to be able to make generalizations about a target population. So our inferential claim is what we care about. We care about all US adults, right? We care about, when we looked at the poll before, we don't care about what the people that were surveyed say about, have they heard about the term Latinx, or how authoritarian are they, right? We want to know about all US Hispanic adults, or all US adults, or all women who are US adults, et cetera. We want to know about that target population. Okay, next, generate a 95% confidence interval for the mean of mental health indicator. Okay, so I'm just going to use the syntax, but again, you can go analyze descriptives, explore, and put yours in if you'd prefer. Make sure you're using the indicator one on this. Okay, so I need to put in my syntax and my output. And again, I could get rid of some of that. I'll just leave the whole thing here so you can see it that way too, because both are right. It doesn't really matter. And then it says what are the upper and lower bounds. So that's 0.45 is the lower bound, and 0.50 is the upper bound, right? We can see the mean is 0.48, and explain what it means in context. So because this is 0 and 1, yes, this is a mean. However, we interpret means of indicator variables as proportions of how many respondents answered with a 1. So like this 0.48 means that 48% of respondents answered a 1 for this. So let's look at what the coding is for this. And it's, the original question was, now I'm thinking about your mental health, which includes stress, depression, and problems with emotions. For how many days during the past 30 days was your mental health not good? And then the indicator one, 0 meant they said no days. Every day it was fine, right? And then 1 means 1 to 30 days. So at least one day they had poor mental health. So the sample here, this would be interpreted as 48% of respondents reported having at least one day during the past 30 days where their mental health was not good. Okay, so let's look at our confidence interval. So I'm going to use my template for proportions. So we are 95% confident that as of 2022, somewhere between 45% and 50% of US adults had at least one day of poor mental health out of the past 30 days. Yep. Okay, so again, this is a proportion that answered whatever the value of the 1 is. We could look at this with one more if you want. Let's look at another indicator. Let's do own gun indicator. Okay, so I'm just going to change this. And so we're saying among our respondents, right, the sample statistic, 36% say they do own a gun, I believe. Let's check. Yeah, it's gun in home or garage. 0 is no, and 1 is yes. So it's the portion that say yes. That's what the mean means for this. Right, not to be confused with the mean for a ratio level variable. This is something we interpret as a proportion. So we are 95% confident that among all US adults in 2022, somewhere between a third and a fifth, right? So somewhere between 34% and 38% owned a gun in their home or garage. All right, that is your demo lab for the week.